Consumer Price Index showed inflation cooling in March for the ninth month in a row. Prices dropped year over year on major appliances, TVs, used cars, and more. The number of people who applied for unemployment benefits last week came in at its highest in more than a year, signaling a slightly slowing job market. The March unemployment rate, though, was still near a 50-year low. Delta Airlines posted a first quarter loss, blaming the cost of the new pilot contract. But Delta says this current quarter will be profitable as peak travel season approaches. Amazon CEO Andy Jassy says in his shareholder letter he's confident he can get costs at that company under control. Jessica Ettinger, CNBC.
Are you the parent of a 2 to 7-year-old? Listen closely for an exciting free radio offer. By now, you've probably heard of ABC Mouse, the Parents' Choice Award-winning online learning program that's actually changing the lives of early learners everywhere.
ABC Mouse is like a little one-on-one teacher. It has helped her so much.
Right now, we're offering a special radio promo to try it free for a month. But you have to go to abcmouse.com/radio to claim your free month. That's abcmouse.com/radio.
Sponsored by Age of Learning.
Finding great people to hire can be like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but not with ZipRecruiter. Their powerful matching technology delivers so many qualified candidates, it's like finding a needle in a needle stack. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. For less hay and more needles, head to ZipRecruiter.
Try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/free.
In the heart of San Bernardino, California, the Teamsters Local 1932 Training Center is designed to train workers for high-demand, good-paying jobs in various industries throughout the Inland Empire. If you want a pathway to a high-paying job and the respect that comes with a union contract, visit 1932trainingcenter.org to enroll today. That's 1932trainingcenter.org.
Labor unions built the middle class, and the middle class built America. That's the message from Teamsters Local 1932, a strong and successful labor union based in San Bernardino that represents over 14,000 hardworking people across the Inland Empire. The Teamsters are ready to help you organize for better pay, increased benefits, and improved working conditions. Reach out to Teamsters 1932 at teamsters1932.org/organize to speak with an organizer today.
One of the best ways to build a healthier local economy is by shopping locally. Teamster Advantage is a shop local program started by Teamster Local 1932 that has brought together hundreds of locally owned businesses to provide discounts for residents who make shopping locally their priority. Everything from restaurants like Corky's to fun times at SB Raceway and much, much more. If you're not currently a Teamster and you want access to these local business discounts, contact Jennifer at 909-889-8377, extension 224. Give her a call. That number again is 909-889-8377, extension 224.
Are you underpaid and overworked? Is a living wage and employee benefits like affordable health care more of a dream than a reality for you and your family? If so, it's time to form a union. Don't be denied the wages and benefits you deserve. Come together in a union with the power of numbers. A union is not a privilege, it's your right, and it will make a difference. Contact Teamsters Local 1932, a powerful and successful labor union in San Bernardino, by visiting teamsters1932.org/organize to start today.
Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Had a thought today about George Carlin. It's been years since George Carlin passed. And one of the moments popped into my head. He used to say that BS was the glue that held the country together. Big steaming piles of BS. And, I started thinking about it. I go, there's some truth in that. We believed in a lot of things that, weren't necessarily true. That if you give tax cuts to rich people, it's going to manna from heaven will flow, that trickle-down economics was a good thing for working people, that if you worked hard, you played by the rules, you got ahead. There were a lot of those things that we believed, that we took to heart, that I still want to believe. I still believe Americans want to believe. But that was back when we had a common glue. And that common glue was an economy that worked for people. That there was that opportunity to do better. That was that opportunity for your kids to do much better. And sadly, that's kind of been flowing backwards. And understand, I mean, there were fewer BS makers back then. Now we've got tons of them. In fact, most people are full of it at this point. And you start looking around at all of the insanity that goes on every day now. And it's a lot of it's coming out of the Republican camps. Increasingly, you're seeing them use, what's the right word? Fascistic, I don't want to go there. Autocratic would be a better way of putting it. Whether they're firing prosecutors because, well, we don't like them, or they're pitching legislators out in Tennessee. It just seems that some of this stuff is getting extreme while they're pointing the finger at everyone else, using police powers to enforce morality. And again, this is one of those things where you go, really? Creating, and I'm going to give credit, they do organize people who are afraid and are struggling, and they give them a common enemy. And that common enemy has been anyone who is not stupid, education as a whole, anyone who cares about their neighbors. There seems to be this real heavy push to go after sanity. And it's, one of these things my mother always said, if someone's pointing their finger at you, there's three pointing back at you. Common sense. And it's interesting to me that you look at what the Republican Party has become. Because, I grew up, believing that they were people who were the business leaders. They were the intellectual elites. They're the ones who knew better. They always fashioned themselves as the patriarch. And, that didn't do well for working people, because working people were just there to clean up after them. Now, sadly, the GOP is full of election deniers and militia members and religious extremists and white nationalists and Q kooks, and wow, and at a frighteningly high number. And this is where it's kind of frightening, because these folks, and I know a bunch of them, they're sold on the idea that they're fighting the righteous fight, that they're fighting for the foundation of the nation, while what they're doing is tearing down institutions and tearing down, what this country stood for. And there is, and we've been seeing this over the last 20 years, there is a realignment. The Democratic Party used to be the party of the working class, strong working class party. And because of Bill Clinton and because of, Barack Obama to a large extent, we've lost them. And I look at what Joe Biden's doing and not promoting enough this idea of bringing back manufacturing, this idea of reinvesting in our infrastructure and creating those jobs that were the foundation of this nation. And I look at what Marcy Kaptur put out along with the folks over at Ballotpedia. They point out that 9 of the 10 wealthiest congressional districts in this country are now represented by Democrats, and now Republicans, they represent more than half of the country's poorer districts. And, immediately my mind goes to, how is that possible? How is it possible that in red districts or in poor districts, they're now looking to the Republican Party for answers when there are no answers? There's nothing there. There's no policy there. And I keep asking for it. Where's the policy? One would have thought, and there was a glimmer, there was a moment after Roe went down where there were a couple of Republican voices going, maybe we should, figure out how, if all these kids are going to be coming, and being here, maybe we should search for some policies. And that was quickly shut down. And this is where I'm kind of concerned about where we're heading, because look, the right-wing message machine is just incredibly powerful. They have sold working class people on the idea that we give the wealthy all that they want. We don't fight and demand better from jobs, and that we fight for tax cuts for the rich, and that's the best we're getting. I know. There's a lot of hate that goes into this. I've heard that before, but the reality is, and I go back to my position on Trump. When he came on the scene in 2015, he sold a vision, and that vision was we were going to recreate the good old days. Those factories were going to be humming. Those union jobs were going to come back. That opportunity that families had was going to be front and center. And I know a lot of people say, no, Rick, it's because they're racist and homophobic and misogynistic. And you go, okay, yeah, they're those things. But I don't know that I'm buying that that's the reason. And I've said it before. I look at my family. They were all of those things and have been for, as long as I've known them. That never motivated them to vote. That never motivated them to get involved or engaged or active in any way. But returning those jobs back, recreating that economy, that sense of security, that's what got them. But what does our media do? Well, our media keeps feeding nonsense. Like yesterday, there was a big story. The big story was when Donald Trump was being arraigned and being booked, the people who were fingerprinting him, all those people were crying. They were sobbing, tears flowing down their eyes, apologizing profusely. Oh, I can't believe I have to do this. And there was Donald, the consoler in chief. No, it's okay. I mean, it was really a great image, and you had to know it was BS. And now we find out that people are saying that never happened. When does that ever happen? These people don't care about the inmates. It was all just nonsense. But again, it's about tearing down institutions. It's about going after the justice system. It's going after the DA's office. And Republicans did not miss a beat. In fact, there's new legislation from House Republicans that are going to, where they want to prevent local district attorneys from pursuing any charges against Trump. That means Fannie Willis down in Georgia, if you didn't know. The Republican Party is going to jump in. You had, Mr. Weaponization, Jim Jordan going, we're going to call in the district attorney and we're going to interrogate him. We're going to shake him down and threaten him. How insane are we at this moment? All of our systems are upside down. I mean, we're seeing shootings happening, and we got a Republican Party going, that's the price of admission. Sorry. There's a tax on education. Look, Missouri, freaking Missouri, defunded all the public libraries. I know, we love the poorly educated. This way we're going to make them even less educated. And now we're with the morality police again. And what's interesting to me is as always, none of this has ever changed. The people who are pointing their finger, the ones who are going, there's people out there, they're sexualizing children. And they're out there, it's those pedophiles, who they themselves, it's almost like daily, there's a Republican being arrested for some kind of sex crime, or this gem. I can't believe, this is one of those things where you go, Missouri State Senator Mike Moon. I can't believe these words came out of his mouth. I'm literally, I was speechless as I'm going, I got to play that again, because who says that? Who says this? They were debating a bill on banning gender-affirming care for transgender minors. They were going back and forth on this, and the person who was asking the questions said, you were somebody who supported 12-year-olds marrying. And this guy jumps in the middle of it and says, do you know any kids who have been married at the age of 12? Now, my mind goes, He's going to say it's all nonsense. There's no way this is happening. You're making it up. Stop it. This is what I was assuming. I was assuming that this guy was going to say, we don't believe in 12-year-olds getting married to adults. Because, again, we're the party who doesn't believe in pedophiles. We're the party who takes on pedophiles. But no. He goes a whole different way. He goes, do you know any kids who've been married at age 12? He goes, I do. And guess what? They're still married. Yes, because they're 12. They can't sign a legal document to get divorced. So of course they are. This is insane to me. And, it's one of those things where, if he would have said that to me, I would say, well, did you report it? Because this should be a crime. A 12-year-old marrying it's literally insane. But it goes on in this country. But we understand what we do is we cover it. We make it a little more palatable by saying, religious freedom. It's all in the name of religion and parental rights. I'm confused. It's kind of like these people, lib of TikTok or something, one of these right-wing groups who post these videos. One of them was a boy dressed up as a girl doing a dance, and they're saying this is horrible, this is pedophiles, and this is all this stuff. And I'm going, if you believe that, why are you sharing it? And it kind of reminded me of some of the people who get caught with child porn on their computers, and then go, no, I was just doing research. With their mouths open on the can, like the rest of their research. But this is a moment where we as a society, we better figure this stuff out, because the crazies are legislating. They're putting, like I said, they're putting the Q-kooks and the militia folks and these 3%, all of the, well, I would say the worst people. People who don't care about governing. They care about ruling. And there's a huge difference between legislating and dictating. And this is why there's part of me that goes, I'm happy to see what happened in Tennessee. Happy to see that the Republicans lost their mind. I'm happy to see that they went and they expelled these two representatives, and that the system held. They're right back where they're supposed to be. This might be an opportunity for Democrats to rally around and say, look at what these people are doing. Look how extreme the GOP has gotten. I mean, at some point we've got business to do, and lots of it. The headline today over at Market Watch, I believe, was 39% of Americans say they've skipped meals to make their rent or house payments. 39% of people are skipping meals because they got to pay their bills. And you look at some of the other polling out there. This survey from Clever Real Estate. They are citing that 61% of the people see their personal financial situation as their bigger stressor. 57% say that their mental health's being affected. You got 53% saying their physical health's being affected. 48% are saying their relationships are being affected. And what's going on? People are in this inflation's basically ripping us apart. And there's nobody on the Republican side offering anything. The House is done. Now, what I found interesting is baby boomers, they got away with the least missed meals, 20%. And I would argue a lot of that's got to do with Social Security and the fact that they have a basic income and the fact that they've paid their homes off. Gen X, about 41%. Millennials, 44%. Gen Z, 37%. 37% in Gen Z. And when you look at the fact that housing prices have increased 160% in just the last 20 years, and wages, well, let's not even go there. We got a lot of work to do, and actual work. But this is why, and I've said this a million times, this is why Republicans do this dog and pony show, which is why all this craziness is out in front of us, which is why all of this division and all of this stuff's going on, to distract us from the reality that we're getting screwed. And daily we're getting screwed over But as long as they keep feeding the outrage candy, as long as they keep feeding the, hey, don't talk to them, we're never going to come around. I mean, it's frightening when you look at the economic numbers that are out there. When you've got 58% of the country, 58% in the most recent survey of families who are living paycheck to paycheck. Something wrong here, folks. Something wrong in our elected leaders, especially those on the red side of things. They're not doing anything to help us. So that's why it's kind of shocking to me, kind of surprising to me, that working people would gravitate towards that. But again, I guess it is. They're still wishing and hoping. Like they say, wish in one hand and you know what in the other. See which one fills up first. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, interesting little tidbit. The first Republican debate is going to be hosted by the F channel, F News. And the other thing is, I look at Fox News, they're less believable than even the WWE. I mean, really, honestly and truthfully. I saw the interview with Tucker Carlson. And I got to tell you, I have no respect for Tucker Carlson whatsoever, on any level whatsoever, with his interview with Trump. I mean, it was ridiculous, especially knowing what he said about Trump, because of the loss of the Dominion lawsuit, because of all of the texts and this stuff, calling him a moron and, saying that he hates Trump passionately and believes Trump's a destroyer and a demonic force. I loved that one. He, as a president, he was a disaster, and his treatment after the 2020 election being disgusting. None of that came up during the interview, oddly enough. And it's as I've been saying all along, these people don't believe anything. They're nihilistic. You know what they care about? They care about the money. That's what they care about. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on one. Alice, how are you?
Totally insane. So, you were talking about what happened, with the guy saying, well, they're still married, whatever legislature was, because they're all running together in my mind now if they're a red state.
Yeah.
You would assume, I guess those of us who have a smidgen of intelligence, would assume that we could at least across the board come to an idea of, gee, what is an appropriate age for someone to get married? And at what age, if you have sex with someone or are dating someone and you're in your 30s or 40s or whatever, is this considered that you are a pedophile? You would think that
we've already got those laws, Alice. They're already there.
Well, I mean the people believing them. Oh. You would think that we would, come say, well, if you're 12 years old and you're wanting to marry somebody, this is a crime. Yeah. I can't fathom this because it's almost at the point where you go, so we have the laws, and you're all are the ones that are screaming about child molesters and sacrificing kids and all that kind of good stuff, Q nonsense and whatnot, and blaming us for being pedophiles. But yet, 9, 10 years old, 11, 12, they're going, well, they're married, so there's not a problem with it.
That's crazy. It's nuts to me,
It's
Alice.
insane.
Appreciate the call. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
No, I mean, it's just one of those things where you just go, I don't know. Let's go to Brian on line 3 in New Mexico. Brian, how are you today?
Hey, good evening. First time listener and caller. I just thought I'd call in and comment. I'm retired IBEW.
Well, welcome to the show, brother. What's on your mind?
Well, a lot of things. How long have you been hosting a radio show now? I'm just curious.
About 18 years.
Wow. What market are you normally in or have been in?
We're in 40 markets across the country.
Great.
I appreciate the call. I appreciate it, Brian. Thanks so much. I know where this is going. Maybe another time when I have less time to take. I don't need the questioning. I'm in this weird mood today, and I'm really just kind of freaked out about where we're heading. And I'm in. Have you ever been in one of those moods where you're just not in the mood for nonsense? Today's that day for me. When you see, and this 12-year-old story, this is what grabbed me. I've got 3 kids. I got 2 daughters, and if someone told me that, an adult was gonna touch my 12-year-old, they'd be arresting me. They'd be taking me away. The fact that there are people who are going, I know 12-year-olds who are married and they're still together, that's frightening to me. And to do it with some kind of pride and some kind of certainty is quite, I can only come back to frightening. Especially when you're talking about a party that's saying we've got to protect the children. There's a conversation to be had about protecting the children, and I thought we had already had the one about 12-year-olds. I thought we had already had the one that got us down past this. Clearly not. Clearly not. But back to the Tucker Carlson piece. I got to tell you, I'm struggling with it. Did not mention any of the disgust. Did not mention any of the outrage that he had secretly said, and basically sat there as a lapdog. But again, as I said, it's all about, it's not red or blue, it's green. Thank you, Rupert. Let's take a quick break. Right back to the club. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day the United States Supreme Court decided the case National Labor Relations Board versus Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation. This case declared that the National Labor Relations Act of 1935 was indeed constitutional. Also known as the Wagner Act, it is a key statute that provides the legal basis for private sector workers to organize, collectively bargain, and to go on strike. Jones and Laughlin Steel, the 4th largest steel producer in the country at the time, had fired several workers trying to organize with the Steel Workers Organizing Committee in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania in 1935. The NLRB had originally ruled against the company and ordered the workers reinstated with full back pay. But J&L refused, arguing that the act was unconstitutional on the basis that the federal government did not have the right to regulate interstate commerce. In a 5-4 decision, the court ruled that labor management disputes did affect interstate commerce and thus were subject to federal regulations. Historian James Pope notes that the statute was upheld only after a massive wave of worker militancy, punctuated by the spectacular 6-week sit-down strike at General Motor plants in Flint, Michigan, demonstrated what might have happened if the court decided the case differently. And in his book, The Last Great Strike, Little Steele, the CIO, and the Struggle for Labor Rights in New Deal America, legal scholar Ahmed White adds that the case was decided only after 2 years of legal uncertainty. Before Jones and Laughlin was decided, CIO unions were already negotiating and signing collective bargaining agreements. Ruling the Wagner Act constitutional has nonetheless benefited millions of workers for decades. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter @laborhistoryin2.
It's always instructive to hear powerful political officials declare that in the name of democracy, they must usurp the people's democratic authority. This has become all too common, as even so-called democratic regimes in France and Israel have infuriated their people by trying to ram vastly unpopular anti-democratic schemes into law by executive fiat. Luckily, though, our U.S. of A. remains committed to the people's rule, right? Moreover, our leaders agree that local government is best for it's closest to the people, right? No, and no. Since the once conservative Republican Party has turned extremist and downright goofy during the past decade, its governors and lawmakers have become knee-jerk autocrats, imposing their unpopular policies through a crude power play called preemption. This is the despotic use of arbitrary state power to cancel any town, city, or county policies that Republican politicians don't like. Preemption is an extreme governing tool meant to be rarely used in emergency situations. But GOP-controlled state houses in Florida, Texas, Ohio, and elsewhere now use it routinely as an ideological sledgehammer, crushing the right of local people to govern themselves. This has led extremist Republican officials force some of their racist, homophobic, and xenophobic nastiness on communities that vehemently oppose them. But most Republican preemptions are issued in service to corporate elites. For example, when local communities try to raise the minimum wage or prevent corporate money from corrupting local politics, corporate-serving governors rush to outlaw the people's will. This is Jim Hightower saying Texas lawmakers are even trying to supersize and privatize preemption with a blanket decree that all local ordinances restricting corporations are overruled by state law.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, new Pew survey. Back at the end of March, it came out, said 83% of Americans view China negatively. And I'm actually not surprised at that, given the fact that they've been crushing us. All of our jobs seem to be found over there. Again, I know we lost them. It's just weird how we keep finding them in China. Now, 38% of Americans view China as the enemy, 52% view them as a competitor, 6% a partner, which, I guess those are the people making money off of it. The enemy frame, which is interesting, was the top choice among Republicans. 53% of Republicans said that the enemy. Democrats tended to lean towards competitor. I'm not in that camp. I think we've been in the middle of a war, and we're losing because of that frame, that we're a competitor. And here to share some thoughts on the most recent story coming out of the Washington Post about, again, China's attempting to overtake us in another industry, and this time doing it, well, not in the safest of ways. And that's why I've asked our good friend Emily De La Brea to come talk with us. She is the co-founder of Horizon Advisory. HorizonAdvisory.org is their website. Emily, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be chatting.
So are we surprised that people view China negatively, given the fact that we've had, all of this ramp up, all of this job loss, all of this chaos, and that little pandemic thing?
I think we're surprised that there's still that 6% who say partner. Who are those people? Where are they? Did they misread China? But honestly, there is a significant, I'm heartened by those results, because sometimes, talking about China, having these conversations, it is frustrating because you get more pushback than you would expect at this point in time, with, as you said, China having distorted the global economy, having taken American jobs. being the root of the COVID pandemic, and however many deaths that created, messing in the global affairs and undermining freedom and exporting surveillance systems internationally. Despite all of that, I think my day-to-day is a lot more pushback than that poll suggests, which is really heartening.
No, I mean, I'm happy finally, but I do find it interesting that, you got someone like Marsha Blackburn, who is, every day you see her tweeting about how much she despises China, and good, we need somebody in the Senate who's going to pursue our interests. But it's also interesting to see that they're not in the same world with Russia. And I see Russia and China almost on the same page.
Absolutely. And this is something that I think is being missed broadly in the US, but also globally, and especially probably among European players. China and Russia are absolutely working together. Russia invaded Ukraine, at least in part because it got the nod from China. Russia's been able to maintain its war in Ukraine because it receives economic as well as technological and geopolitical support from China. And China is the one that's benefiting from this entire offensive. China benefits from cheap access to Russian resources. It benefits from the fact that the West is drawn into this conflict that's straining resources with Russia. And China benefits from just being able to use Russia as a geopolitical spoiler. And it is wild to me that in the US, we're saying, what is our Ukraine policy? What is our Russia policy? Not what is our Russia-China policy? And it's also wild to me that in Europe, you have European countries who are worried about their own security because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and that are still going out there and being buddy-buddy with China. And the French president visiting Beijing this past week is like the quintessential example of this, but it goes across the board, and it's absolute lunacy.
It is lunacy, but again, you were in this moment where here at home we're so divided. I don't know if you saw the Tucker Carlson interview with Trump yesterday, and what came out of that. And, again, this just ripping us apart and making us look weak domestically, I think only emboldens them more and emboldens their decisions to do what I think China is eventually going to do, and that's invade Taiwan.
I mean, there is absolutely this, I don't know if this is a catch-22 or what it is, but China absolutely benefits from polarization in the US. At the same time, China is behind and amplifies all of that polarization. I think that if you can solve the China problem, you can solve so much about what we're dealing with in America today. If you look at economic inequality, that's because China took the jobs. When you look at at a much more tactical level at social media, at divisive political narratives, China is amplifying those. Beijing is very, very good at saying, here's something, here's a storyline, here's a voice that's going to tear Americans apart. Let's make sure that voice gets louder, which creates a self-perpetuating cycle, I think, but also just makes it that much more important for us to get on the same page on the China question, narratively, but also with action.
See, I'd always thought that this would be one of those things, and I mistakenly thought, the Russia thing may have been something to bring us together. A country fighting for democracy. We want to make sure that Russia doesn't, take that over and then steamroll on. I thought that would help unite us as a nation. The China thing, 83%. That's, as you said, encouraging. But I thought, again, this is something that could bring us, to unite us, to put down all of the nonsense that divides us, and go, our survival, kind of important.
Exactly. We have a common enemy, and every single one of our interests as Americans, universally as Americans, that common enemy is attacking us and is a threat to us. And I do think part of the problem is that there's nothing for us to grab onto as here's what the alternative is, or here's how we respond to this common enemy. You can sit there in today's narrative, right? And you can hate on China and you can say they're bad, they're scary, they're a threat to the global system. But there aren't a lot of players out there who are saying, okay, here's our positive vision for the path forward. Here's what a world looks like where you don't have China breaking the rules, and you don't have China distorting global markets, and you don't have China spreading authoritarianism internationally, and let's all get behind that vision. And I think that makes it a lot more difficult for us to unify around this idea of a common adversary, because there's nothing really to unify around.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary because you said, authoritarian regime. And I'm going, look, I see what's going on in Republican circles as them being quite authoritarian in this moment. You're expelling legislators for having the audacity to speak out on the floor. And, some of the things that we're seeing in state houses across this country are quite frightening when you stop and look at it. And I think that if we can't figure out that, how are we going to figure out something as big as, as the China issue, as you put it, going forward? I feel hopeless, and I hate feeling like that.
Yeah, me too. I hate feeling like that. And it's a tough thing because our ability to have this conversation, right? For you to say that, for us to, all of the nonsense that goes on in American politics, we have this narrative that that's our strength, right? Because we can openly discuss issues, whether they're about people in power or the people not in power. We can have fights on, legislative floors. We can talk about China. We can talk about American politics. We can talk about anything, and we think about that as our strength. But what China is really, really good at doing is saying, "Oh, hey, this is something you think of as a strength. Let's make that your weakness now. Let's turn that ability of yours to have open, free, fair conversation and make it something that divides you, or at least amplify the edge on it that makes it something that could divide us." And I think that's scary not only because of what China can do, but also because we don't have a response to it. I end up in conversation after conversation where people just dig in their heels and they say, okay, well, I guess one of two things. Either free, fair exchange of information, that's an American strength, so we don't have anything to fear from China twisting it. Or the answer is, okay, China's twisting this, so we can't have free, fair exchange of information anymore. And neither of those is good.
Right.
And it's like everyone, it's like the whole system's brain is short-circuiting. Which is not an awesome situation.
No, so where's the way forward in this? I mean, because you have people, in Congress, last week, we're going to ban TikTok. And I'm against banning TikTok if you're not going to do to everybody else what you're claiming TikTok does, because they're all doing it, and all that information is saleable. I think we've allowed that, the social media thing to get so far out of hand that it doesn't matter if you're going to go after TikTok alone, because 4 of the top 5 apps downloaded in this country are Chinese apps. Are you going to go after them as well? I think maybe you should, but what are you going to do? Because it's gotten so big.
And this is the problem with American China policy generally, right? We say, okay, let's ban TikTok, or okay, let's ban Huawei, and we don't deal with the actual problem. Just as you said, we don't deal with those other 4 apps. We don't deal with whatever ByteDance, the company that owns TikTok, is going to come out with next. And that's just, it's a lack of strategic vision. It's a lack of anything that's actually proactive. But across the board, the point here is that China breaks the rules, so China shouldn't be allowed to play. And it just has to be that big and that sweeping. And the problem isn't, American systems. It's not, what we were talking about, free, fair exchange of information. It's not, necessarily the global trade system per se. It's China breaking the rules of those things. And so the answer is you punish China for breaking the rules. But we're just still too busy either not wanting to acknowledge that it's the Chinese Communist Party broadly, or not knowing what tools to use as a system, or wanting to be able to talk the talk and not walk the walk and deal with the consequences, including commercial consequences, that no one's actually out there doing that.
No, it's scary. I listen to the Rick Smith Show with Emily De La Bruyere. She's a co-founder of Horizon Advisory. You want to check out the work that they do, horizonadvisory.org. Now, I got to get to the reason I asked you to come on the show to begin with, which is this Washington Post article talking about lab safety in China, because a lot of people that pandemic thing we just lived through came from Wuhan. This article kind of takes it as this is now the common position that we now know definitively where it came from. But they're saying, look, things are so lax, so bad, so out of hand that another pandemic is quite possible. This again, a reason we need to be taking China up.
Exactly. It fits perfectly within the same rubric. China takes part in the international system. and breaks the rules of the international system. You can see that in trade. In this case, you can see it them not having the safety requirements you should have in a super dangerous lab. They break the rules of the system because it's in their interests, and then the rest of the world suffers. And the rest of the world suffers, whether that's because industrial bases are hollowed out, jobs are lost, security is lost to China, or because a pandemic takes over and life as we know it is over. And this is the case across the board. China thinks the rules don't apply to it. China doesn't care about the ramifications of what it's doing for any other player, except actually in that it wants those ramifications to be negative in many instances. And Beijing's just out there playing for its own interest. And we're not holding China accountable because no one wants to realize this.
But can we? I mean, this is one of those things I know someone's going, can we? It's gotten so big now. Can we hold them accountable? Is there a way to rein them in? Because a lot of people have tried. There's been a lot of lip service. This isn't just, this isn't just Biden. This isn't just Trump. It's Obama. It's all of them. From 2000 forward. Is there anything at this point we can do?
I mean, yes, we can. And I know I've said it before, with you, and I'll say it again. Like, we are still the most powerful country in the world, and in theory, we have strong relationships with the other core, most powerful countries in the world. The problem is that holding China accountable comes at a cost, and no one is willing to pay that cost. But maybe we're at a point where what percent of Americans think China is an adversary? Like, maybe that's a point where the pressures in this country are such that someone's going to pay that cost. But it has to happen soon, because at some point there's a tipping point where we can't do it anymore.
And look, I talked to people while we were doing our Working Class Heroes tour. We're going through Iowa and Wisconsin, and you find out that the Chinese have bought up a bunch of farms. You go out to Oklahoma, they basically, from what someone just told me, they basically own all of the pot fields in Oklahoma because they've bought up our property, and it's because that's how our system is. Our system is open and allows people to come in and do this, as where we still haven't cracked anything over there. I mean, a lot of our jobs are there, as you said. And there are a lot of American names over there, but no American ownership.
Yeah, and they make sure that we can't go in there and buy their farmland, that we're not taking their jobs, and that our companies are never going to have lasting, strong footholds in their market that they're not going to push us out of. They make sure of all of that to create a relationship where we depend on them more than they depend on us. And they cull our resources, and we can't benefit from theirs. And that's fundamentally against the rules of the international system. It undermines our security, it undermines our economic prosperity, it undermines our freedom. And that's perpetuated, though, as a system by the fact that people are going to make make dollars in the short term from selling that land to China, or from moving jobs to China, or from having a technology partnership with China. And we have to be willing to not make that money in the short term for the sake of our long-term future as a country.
Anyone you see doing anything, moving us in a direction to do anything helpful? I was hopeful at a moment when Republicans in the House were saying, "Hey, we're going to have this committee on China," and they were going to, and our friend Scott Paul went and testified, and there was a whole bunch of anything. Do you think comes out of that, or is this again just a dog and pony show?
I mean, I think that committee, it's a really, really strong bipartisan platform for raising precisely the issues we're talking about, and from all angles, economic security, freedom, and it's a bipartisan committee. That's huge. That takes the whole narrative of this as a bipartisan issue, and it creates a forum for it. So I think that's really exciting, and has the potential to turn, to actually capitalize on a window of opportunity in the U.S. political system. I also think that it's small and it's baby steps, but there are movements in the private sector that are encouraging. As some companies move out of China, some companies, there's more of a narrative about reshoring, about made in America, about finding ways to make things in America, about supply chain security than there was 2 years ago. The issue is that the pace at which it happens has to pick up, and so does the sincerity with which it's framed. It's not enough to have an assembly facility in China. That also has to be, in the US. The inputs for that also have to be made in trusted places. And that's where I think there has to be the push and the pull from the government system, from the regulatory system, like the China Commission.
Are we happy so far with what Biden's done? I mean, there's got to be more, obviously more done, but I think we're heading near the right direction. No.
So I'll just raise the thing that's frustrating me probably the most these days, and I'm easily frustrated, so don't make me make all these things. But the reality that we're seeing Chinese companies benefit from the Inflation Reduction Act, and therefore Chinese companies not only get taxpayer dollars and taxpayer dollars that are supposed to go to American industry, but also Chinese companies cementing a place for themselves in critical U.S. value chains. That really, really frustrates me, and I see that as a failure of today's Washington.
There's nothing there. You go, how is that happening? How is that possibly allowed to happen? On either side of the aisle, how is anybody go, that's a good idea?
Yeah, anybody, and like, the thing that's astonishing about it is that, but also, these are in the most high-profile cases, these are partnerships between the Chinese entity and an American company. How does the American company say, this is a good idea? Reputation,
greed. Just want the short term. Got to get the short-term payout.
Yeah, you would just think that we are in an environment today where somebody would be like, oh, there's going to be blowback. That does not look good for you. You're a sellout if you do that.
We're not that culture anymore. Rupert Murdoch was right. It's not about red or blue. It's about green. Emily, I appreciate the time and the frustration. I now feel even more frustrated than I did.
Oh, great.
If
awesome.
that were possible. But I appreciate the time, and I appreciate the work that you guys do there at Horizon Advisory. I hope folks will take a look at the website, horizonadvisory.org. Emily De La Brea, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that workers at the Toledo Auto Light Factory decided to go on strike. The company made electric starters for the auto giants in nearby Detroit. The punishing effects of the Great Depression had hit the auto industry hard. Unemployment in the industrial city of Toledo soared. At the Auto Light plant, workers faced increased scrutiny from their bosses, who knew hundreds of eager-to-work laborers stood at the ready just outside the plant's gate, ready to take the job of anyone who dared to complain. Philip Croth and Margaret Beagle recalled the working conditions in an oral history of the strike, saying, under observation even into the toilets, workers found themselves sneaking a bite to eat or a puff of a cigarette, aware that they would be fired if discovered. One of the most hated practices by management was known as the bench. Workers were told to sit on a bench where they would wait until they were needed to perform a job. Once that job ended, they went back to the bench, being paid for only the time spent while working. Faced with such conditions, the workers had had enough and went out on strike. The company won an injunction that allowed only 25 workers to picket at any one location. But then something happened that the company had not expected. The Lucas County Unemployment League stood up with the picketers. Instead of taking the jobs of those on strike, the unemployed members of the league rallied to the picket lines in defiance of the injunction. In late May, picketers and the National Guard clashed in what became known as the Battle of Toledo. Finally, on June 2nd, the strike was settled. The workers had won a 5% raise and union recognition. Today's Labor History in 2 brought to you in memory of Carol Hillman, a passionate friend of workers and volunteer of the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So evidently the judge that's overseeing the Dominion lawsuit evidently has sanctioned the F channel because it's being claimed that the F channel's legal team was not being straightforward with him and actually withheld evidence. Not good stuff for the F channel. Because understand, there are going to be a lot of lawsuits. The Dominion one, the Smartmatic one, there's that. But this is going to get interesting. Because one of their big shareholders, a guy named Robert Schwartz, he has filed a lawsuit in the Delaware court saying that, look, the directors of the F channel breached their duties to ensure that Fox followed their own ethical standards, and they put their reputation at risk instead of doing what was in the interest of the shareholder. They sought to keep Trump's supporters tuning in, and this is one of those things where you go, yeah, of course, they're probably going to lose, and it's going to be really costly, and it should be. And as if Rupert Murdoch doesn't have enough problems, evidently it's being reported that he has dumped his fourth wife. Jerry Hall evidently went away, went to their Oxfordshire estate, and while they're waiting for Uncle Rupert to show up, got a text, said, "Jerry, sadly, I've decided to call an end to our marriage. We have certainly had some good times, but I have much to do. My New York lawyers will contact yours immediately." She claims that she was blindsided by this, and you go, yeah, that's how things are done. I wonder if they reported that on the F channel, and I wonder if they reported it accurately. Just throwing that out there. And again, family values, the people of family values. And to throw the family values thing out there, Missouri State Senator Mike Moon. Again, Mike Moon, remember that name. While being questioned on affirmative care, gender-affirming care, actually came out with the question, do you know any kids who have been married at age 12? And said that I do. And guess what? They're still married. Proud of it. Proud of it. Also, a South Dakota candidate for Senate. He ran for Senate, I guess, last time around. He pled guilty to 2 counts of felony incest. The party of family values. Again, as my mother said, when they're pointing a finger, check the other 3 and find out where those are going. Frightening, scary times. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'll take a quick break, right back after this. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Also, our weekly Saturday Not for Terrestrial Radio podcast. You will never want to miss that. Back after this.
Looking at Louisiana now, it can serve as a model for what we can expect to happen in the future.
Scientists find a dramatic, abnormal rise in sea levels in the southeast.
Our proposed rule would dramatically reduce the number of people with elevated cancer risk from breathing air toxins.
Biden EPA limits air pollution from chemical and plastics plants. Plus,
there's a bell to that. That's gone. It's out of Tiger Stadium.
Global warming is boosting home runs in Major League Baseball.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradVlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Leave my gas stove, my air conditioner, my light bulbs, red meat, SUV, and especially my toilet paper alone.
Hey, Sean Hannity, after lying to your audience for all of these years, don't you find it strange that not a single one of those things has been taken from you? Food for thought. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, never mind that liar, Sean Hannity. What truths do you have to share with us today?
Well, first up, March 2023 was the second warmest March ever recorded since record-keeping began in the 1850s. That's according to Europe's climate change service, Copernicus. The fact that March 2023 clocked in as the second hottest March is very concerning.
KCAA Loma Linda. The Legacy KCAA 1050 AM and Express 106.5 FM.
Key News. I'm Ed Donahue. An arrest has been made in connection with the leak of classified military documents on the Ukraine war. Attorney General Merrick Garland says 21-year-old Jack Teixeira was arrested in Massachusetts.
In connection with an investigation into alleged unauthorized removal, retention, and transmission of classified national defense information. Teixeira is an employee of the United States Air Force National Guard.
Investigators believe Teixeira, who specializes in intelligence, led the online chat group where the documents were posted. Garland says FBI agents converged at Teixeira's home near Providence, Rhode Island, and heavily armed tactical agents took him into custody outside the property without incident. Brigadier General Pat Ryder at the Pentagon was asked about the impact of this leak.
Just as we're limited in what we can say about the DOJ's ongoing investigation, we'll be also very limited in what we can say about any of the documents themselves.
A source tells the AP Teixeira opposed many of the priorities of the government and denounced the military, but stressed he didn't believe Teixeira leaked documents to undermine the government or for an ideological reason. Justin Pearson was sworn in today in the Tennessee House. He is one of two black lawmakers kicked out by Republican leadership over support of gun control protesters.
There will be a new building of this building with a foundation built on love, with pillars of justice rising up, with rafters of courage covering us, with doors that are open to everybody in the state of Tennessee.
Justin Jones, the other lawmaker in Tennessee, was also reinstated. Police say the suspect, who made credible threats against California's capital, shot a gun from his vehicle while driving through two Sacramento suburbs last night, lodging bullets